Welcome to a Love Ignites Peace book club podcast. This month we have read the book Maiden to Mother, and it is really special that we have two generations of women on this podcast to discuss this book. But before we get started, let's check in and say hello to everyone. Hello, Noelle.
Hello. I'm rested and ready to go.
You look relaxed, glowy,
Yes.
smooth.
All of the above. I feel that way inside too.
We got a nice sunny day here in Southern California. We usually get May gray, June gloom. So whenever the sun is coming out everywhere else, it's disappearing here for a couple of months. But our neighborhood pool is right behind my backyard, and it was really sweet to hear all the kids. It's like the first couple of days of summer out here. So everybody and all the teachers in the neighborhood, I could hear them like chit-chatting out there, like summer just started. And then like someone retired from being a teacher, but I was like, oh man. So I went outside to work in the backyard because I was like, I really feel like I'm missing out here. So I'm gonna just pretend I'm on summer vacation while I'm typing away.
I love it. I know.
Enjoying all the moments. And now we are going to explore the book Maiden to Mother, which I think is going to be a very interesting conversation. Shlenny, would you like to read the introduction to the book?
Sure. All right, let's do this. Woo! Okay. When goddess culture was stolen and buried, so too were women's rites of passage into our wild, intuitive femininity and maturity. In Maiden to Mother, author Sarah Durham Wilson explores the ancient rites that guided a maiden into maturity and embraced the woman or the mother energy. Becoming the mother is every woman's birthright, regardless of whether or not she raises children. The mother is who we needed as a child, who we were meant to be in this life, and who the world needs us to be now. While the pre-patriarchal cultures honored women's natural cycles, today society infantilizes women, idolizing youthful traits such as pretty, pleasing, and polite, in order to keep us distracted and dependent. While a healthy version of the maiden will always remain a part of us, there comes a time when we must no longer let her wounds and immaturity guide our lives. We must step into our mature feminine fullness. Through personal stories, rituals, teachings, and practices, Wilson helps women heal the mother wound and dismantle our internalized patriarchy with its false, constricting standards for the feminine, so that we may live with authenticity and feast on the richness of life. Midlife is not, as our culture proposes, where a woman's power ends, writes Wilson, but where it really begins. There you have it, ladies. What did you think? I'm so excited to chat with you all about this. And as my mom said earlier, especially with two different generations of women on here, and let's get into it. Likes, dislikes?
Jenna, start us off. Oh, I'm sorry.
Jenna,
Teresa.
go girl.
I'm so excited to hear from Jenna. I've literally been thinking that like all book.
No. Okay. Well, this was not my favorite, as I'm sure those who know me very well could assume. But there were some great nuggets, as I will say, with every single book we read. And I do have some great highlights that I will call out later. I don't know where to start with reviewing this book, because that's how I felt as I was reading it. I was like, I don't know where to start. For me, and this has been a pattern through all the book clubs, I do not love mythology. So I just get lost the second there's like a mythology story. I think the goddess's name was Inanna, but like I can't with that. So it makes it really hard for me to connect, because it's just not a personal interest of mine. So I think it loses my attention. Like I always gravitate towards the pieces, towards the books and the stories that are about people's real life stories. So like the parts where she was talking about her childhood and her addiction, like I'm gripped at those kinds of parts. But when we get into like metaphors specifically about mythology, again, it's just, there's no other way to put it. It's not a personal interest of mine, so my eyes glaze over. So that being like a constant seed throughout the book made it hard for me, because I was having a hard time even like reading through that part in the beginning of the book. So then when she kept referencing back to it, I was like, oh man, I felt like Darian reading this. I was like, oh no, I'm going to be the critic. However, so that part of it just doesn't do it for me. I don't think it ever will. Not an interest of mine. But I did love the proposition of this idea of like the divine feminine and the powerful feminine and the like child immature side versus the motherly side of things and kind of what that looks like. I thought that was really beautiful. I think I would have liked it more if she had like just approached it all with her like real life story, because, and maybe it was just because my eyes were glazing over at parts of it, but we're like talking through it, and then I'm so gripped when she's talking about her real life, and then she's talking about like witchcraft, and then she's going, and I'm just, to me it felt all over the place and it was hard to keep my interest. But then I'd read something and I'd be like gripped, and then she'd go back to something else and it would kind of lose my interest. The other thing that, and I know this wasn't like the basis of the book, but this was part of her personal story. I have a hard time connecting with like this idea of like people who don't have this like nurturing mother in their life, and that creates this like wounded maiden, because that's just not my story. Like, I've talked to you guys about this. If there's one thing that is like I have done right in my life, it's like my relationship with my mom. We're super tight. We've been tight, swear, since I came out of the womb. Like, I tell her everything. I always have, I always will. And so I understand that there's like, we all have a wounded maiden within us, but this string of her story is that it comes from her not having that motherly caretaker. And I know that that is a story for so many people, but that's just not my personal story, so I can't relate to that. So there were several things, to tie it all together, there were several things that I think were really great takeaways from this book, but I just felt a personal disconnect to the way she was telling the story, with just things that I can't personally relate to, if that makes sense.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
You and I agree 1000%.
Wow.
Are you surprised?
I'm shocked. I'm shocked,
Yeah.
and I'm happy because I thought I was going to be on an island over here. But you know what? I got to tell my truth. I got to surrender and I got to say what I believe.
You're not on an island. I wished that she would have just woven this beautiful story of her childhood, what was lacking, what retrospect, getting into where she's at. I agree with you. All the mythical, it was like two books in one, and I felt she was trying too hard to put the pieces together with mythology and her story. For me, I did not enjoy. That's my take on it.
Teresa just said,
So high
no.
five, girl. High five right here. We're probably the only ones.
Well, I liked it. I actually liked that she wove her story, the story of other women, into the story of Inanna. I didn't always follow the story of Inanna, and I'm actually glad she translated it, because I would not have gotten all of that out of it. So I listened to it while I read along in the book. Whoever was the narrator, she did a beautiful job, I thought. Not that I loved the entire story. It felt like this undercurrent of anger, and I could see from her perspective why. But in the same breath, I'm trying to live my life in a more loving frame of mind, so that was contradictory to me. But I still thought she was a beautiful storyteller. The way she wove it together, I just really enjoyed that piece. I also wanted a little bit more of the crone and the higher perspective of how things played out, and the importance in our lives of the wounded maiden, in our own growth, and even our growth in our mother, that gets us to that kind of higher perspective of the life experience. But I also made the connection, just maybe because what I'm doing outside of this, is to the chakra system. And that those lower three chakras are where the wounded maiden lives and can't move beyond into those higher ways of being until she gets to the mother of her heart chakra, where all of that mothering and loving comes in, and then you move to the upper three chakras into your crone. So I just kind of looked at it through that lens, and that maybe just the lens of while you're reading can impact you. Right. And I'm not much of a person that's about victimhood And there were parts that felt victimhoodish. But I also know that when I am in, because we don't just stay in one, we move up and down, as she alluded to, that I can see myself in the wounded maiden at times. So I guess it mirrored back to me many different aspects of my life. So I appreciated that, even though it was hard.
I think that's pretty profound what you just said. That kind of made me think of something, because I think a lot of the time with these books of like higher consciousness, there's this idea that like you arrive at this place and then you're just a high vibe human and you're always happy and good. And then I do think she emphasized this idea of like you become the mother, but you do like oscillate back to these places of like the wounded maiden. And I thought that was really interesting. And what you said about the kind of victim mentality really resonated with me, because I've caught myself at times where when you're in a really good place and you're doing great and somebody is coming to you with their problems, it's so easy to be like, well, cheer up, don't be a victim, think of it this way, change your aspect. And then it's like, okay, but when you're in an awful place, how often do we immediately go back to like not intentionally being a victim, but being sad or angry or hurt? And like part of that is just the reality of the human experience. But I did really like what you said. It's like we all have parts of both of these, and it's about recognizing it and trying to like evolve. But I resonated with what you just said.
Mama, what do you think?
I was very neutral on this book. There were points that she made I thought were hugely important points for women to pay attention to. Like, again, this idea of the patriarchal culture, the, waiting for your prince to come, needing a man to save you. One of her other points that she made, which I thought was actually a really interesting, profound point, was that as women, when we're obedient to what society expects, we're accepted, it's all this and that, or even with men. But when we're not obedient to what society expects of us, there's ramifications for that. So I really thought she made some good points. I didn't enjoy the Ayana thing. I actually thought it was very hard to follow. And I mean, I like myth, but I don't think to most people the way she described it would have made much sense, honestly. I knew what she was saying, but I don't think she said it very well. I found myself being triggered by the word witch when she used witch and how she used it. And I thought, I think this could have been so more eloquently described and written instead of like just throwing it into this pile of witch. So I was kind of neutral on the book. Good points, didn't love it all.
I was pretty triggered by the word witch as well, which is interesting. And I thought when I brought that up on the podcast, everyone was going to be like, you need to explore that more. So I'm glad somebody else had the same thought. But I think that was the wrong choice of word, just purely based on the connotation surrounding it. And I don't think she's going to be able to disassociate that connotation. It is so deeply held in history, in Halloween movies, in the Blair Witch trials, in so many years and years. And I don't think that she intended it with that connotation. But the second she used that word, she just lost me, because she intended it in a very positive way, but like witchcraft as a premise has a very negative connotation. So it's like I was having a really hard time counterbalancing that and feeling like it was something I could get on board with.
Yeah, I agree.
Same for me. Yeah. I do a lot of work. I read tarot, I channel, I do a lot of that work. I love putting bay leaf and cinnamon in my wallet for abundance. And, I do a lot of that, which could be spells. That's not the mindset. I don't work in that realm. And I've done a lot of clearing and past life work to get rid of that connotation of what makes a trigger for me. I wish she would have used maybe a different word, a different feeling with it, to take us on a journey to work towards our life as crone, because it's a beautiful journey. And quite quite frankly, I think all of us are. I know I was a mother as a maiden. I had a lot of mother qualities. Some people do, some people don't, I guess. I feel blessed that I had a mix of those things. Uh, I wish she would have mixed that up a little bit and been a little gentler, maybe, with some things. Gentler. Yeah.
I think part of what we are all trying to do on our spiritual journey is we are trying to make this ancient wisdom modern. And when you use a word like witch, and when you use some of the mythology like she did, it kind of takes it out of this ancient wisdom into our self-growth era and puts it into an uncomfortable space. And I have noticed on this journey of self-growth through a more spiritual, connected lens that there's a group of people, and I'm not saying that if you identify with the word rich, that you're a part of this group of people. Hear me loud and clear. If which resonates with you and that's your vibe, be free. Like, go do your thing. But I think that there's almost like an unhealed sector of this self-growth, spiritual journey-esque that sometimes just misses the point a little bit. And I kind of think that those are the people that are like, I'm a witch and let me cast my spells. And like, I truly, like, I feel bad saying this because I don't want anyone listening to like feel attacked in that way. If you are truly authentically on your journey and truly living as that healed inner woman, then again, do what resonates with you. But I think that there are a lot of people that I have seen that proclaim to be on this journey and are truly not doing the inner work. It's not that they're not doing the inner work, but are they really being real about the inner work they're doing? And what you said, Noelle, about you could feel some of her anger and her hurt, that was a complaint that I had with this book. It's like, listen, we do live in a patriarchal society, and there are some things that need to be changed. I think all of us as women recognize that. But she sounded like she hated the patriarchy. Down with the patriarchy. Like, excuse the language, but F the men. Like, it was so much that I was like, whoa there, Sarah. Let's simmer down, sister. Like, now, again, her feelings, she's gone through a lot of scenarios that were not in, it sounds like, a great energy. But it kind of was like this man-hating, like, aggressive energy. And I just think that you could feel that she truly wasn't fully healed. Now, you don't have to be a perfect, fully healed person to have wisdom and have learned on your journey. We might have been meeting her at the beginning of her journey or somewhere on her path where she hasn't evolved super far down the lane. And thus, I did love a lot of the messages that she had to share. Surprisingly, I was not bothered by the whole mythological Inanna thing, but I listened to the book and I thought as well, Noelle, I really liked the way the lady read it, and I like to listen to it at about like 1.5. So it was a little bit of a nicer cadence. When I was at 1, I was like, whoa, sister, you're talking slow. But at 1.5, I was like, yeehaw, let's go. And some of the descriptions of the Inanna situation, I was like, okay, this is like a little bit messed up.
Yeah.
I was like, this isn't great. But at the same time, I understood the ultimate premise that she was going for. So likes and dislikes. Likes would be, I think there was some phenomenal points. I was thinking earlier today what I would rate this, and then I finished the last chapter today, and I was like, or the second to last chapter, and I was like, wow, that really brought it home for me. So can't wait to talk about some of those lessons so that those listening can leave with some of those nuggets. Dislikes, you could feel her wounding. I don't think that she's necessarily a woman you fully want to like emulate and evolve into being. And perhaps we need to take more of a love ignites peace approach versus the find your power and fuck everyone else. You know what I mean? There's a difference between finding your power and then being empowered and finding your power and using that as like a reason to hate others. Again, maybe that's an unfair assessment of what she was saying. I feel a bit aggressive about that, but you get the gist.
I think it almost made me feel like the anger part could keep her in victimhood. That's what I kept. It's like 2 steps forward, but now I'm the victim and I'm going to 2 steps forward, explain a little bit. Oops, I'm pissed off. I hate the so now I'm the victim and everybody's sucked. It just was very, a lot of that hitting hard, and it was, not gentle.
I think a couple of points that you all made, which was that you didn't really feel like I think both you, Teresa, I think you and Noelle said this, that you didn't really feel like she went into that much about, like, you wanted more about the crone, or maybe even the maiden or the mother wasn't maybe fully developed. And I think that was because she hasn't actually gotten there herself.
And that's fine if she hasn't gotten there herself, right? We're all on the journey, but kind of like, don't talk to us like you have.
Exactly. It felt a little inauthentic. And maybe that's when she kept going back into victimhood. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Where are you in this story?
Right.
It just made it difficult, I think.
I was just going to say, and I felt like most of us are at this place where we're trying to take responsibility for the life we're creating. And even though we look back at our wounded maiden selves, or even our maiden selves that aren't wounded, and can see our part in that, unless it was an agreement we had before we got here, but we kind of make that assumption that if I can't see my part in here, I must have made that agreement. But I didn't really have a sense of like personal responsibility from her, and she just may not be there. She may be on that uncovering space where she's still just uncovering the different parts of her life and how they played into who she is at this point. And maybe she's not at that place where she sees her part in that yet. But I was really hoping. I saw a glimmer of it in the very last chapter, but not enough that convinced me that it was fully alive and kicking.
Yeah.
A good example of that is her baby daddy. Like, she did not speak about him with reverence. And not that you want to speak of someone with reverence that was unkind and manipulative. I'm not saying that. But if you are really healed, you get to the space that you can also have compassion and understanding. And as my mom says, love 6 actions, Udafar, understanding, discerning, allowing, forgiving, accepting, respecting. And did not feel that from her at all. And one last thing on that, I think one reason I enjoy this group so much on book club is I do feel like we have a group of genuine women on here. We are genuinely on the path, authentically from the inside out. And I will tell you that being on this journey, you run into people that have gifts and they, claim to be this very evolved being, and they're not. And my mom has a good friend, Mara, and she calls these people asses of enlightenment. And I just think
That's a good one.
It's such a good one, because don't preach it if you can't practice it. Now, it doesn't mean that we are always in that, but I mean, we have come across some like incredibly wounded people that from the surface level, you'd be like, oh yeah, they're doing their thing, but they're not going into that inner maiden and being that mother. It's kind of a facade.
I think that also ties back to some of what we've read in the past about like ego and that play into everything, because I think with this aspect of like growing and changing and trying to evolve, humility has to run parallel to that. So there's a difference between teaching and trying to help people along this journey, and then this idea of professing that like, I've made it to here and here's your guidebook for how to make it up here with me. Like, that, I think, really is the ego reflecting some of those lower vibe, like a wounded maiden characteristics, ironically.
I love that, Jenna. That's exactly what I've noticed. What I was thinking as I was reading that, she was still the humility and the out of that ego mind was not quite there.
I felt she still had a lot of anger issues, and there is no forgiveness or humility or kindness or gentleness if you are on a level that you can feel the anger coming through writing. Yeah, that's tough.
Also, the David Hawkins scale of consciousness, right? Like, anger is not a high vibration. So, I mean, what is that at? I think anger might be like 200 frequency.
Yeah, I honestly don't. Yeah, I don't remember for sure.
Yeah.
But anger can be a catalyst.
I was thinking the same thing, that if the right people read that book and they needed that catalyst to get that anger out, this was perfect.
As long as it doesn't fuel more anger.
Yeah.
So,
in all honesty with this, is maybe is what she agreed to show up as. Well, of course, in this lifetime, is to be an instigator of change for the people. I mean, I don't know what her purpose is, but maybe it's something along those lines for the people that are on the cusp of like, you don't know everything. I don't know. I'm trying to get her out.
That's fair. I do see what you're saying too, in the sense that I think part of what she was trying to attack here is this idea that women have to just be polite and, put your pinky up when you drink your tea. And if a woman ever and they have to be passive and they have to be enablers. And if you ever stand for something and stand firm in something and stand up for what you believe in, that's frowned upon. And that is very true. I think we've all experienced that, and the differences in which women are perceived when they stand up for what they believe in versus the way men are perceived. Half the time they're applauded and women are, you're aggressive and angry. And like, sometimes when you're not even angry, you're just standing up for what you believe in. I do think there's a total angle to that. But then you lose and disenfranchise people when you're on this journey to peace and you're just like you got the claws out and you're like ready to fight. Yeah, that's really interesting.
What I love about what you guys both just said, and Noelle, where you're recentering us, is we are a Love Ignites piece, and we do want to see her with love and compassion. Obviously, this is a book club, so we're opining about how we feel and what we think. So perhaps we did come across as too judgmental, and I do want to apologize about that, because she is also on her journey, and we also extend that understanding and that grace to her as well. But maybe just didn't quite resonate with where we are at. Like Jenna said, on this journey of love and peace, perhaps we are not in resonance with the way in which her energetic vibe is around her journey, I guess, at least where she is right now.
Well, it is an absolute privilege to be on this journey with you, evolved women, full of compassion and truly embodying really the mother energy. I mean, that is the ultimate mother energy. And with that, I think we should move on to our next question. Page 14, I'm going to read a couple of quotes that'll lead to our question. Page 14, the author says, "So many women remain asleep as if under a curse, waiting in the casket for the prince to kiss them awake." And then on page 27, she writes, "I thought my rite of initiation out of maidenhood would be, as so many wounded maidens believe, a wedding. Fairy tales. We need a prince, a man to save us." Do you see any of yourself, past or present, in these moments, in these quotes?
Yeah. Well, I've been married twice. I was, very young. Where I'm at now and looking back through the process, I have felt the men that showed up were so beneficial in so many areas of my life for growth. Whether was I lucky enough to be able to look back and go, okay, this is a stepping stone. I helped them too. I'm not saying it was all, we helped each other, but I like men. I needed those particular men in my life, whether it was my dad or a grandfather or a husband or whatever. I was happy I had them as a stepping stone to where I am today. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not going to man bash, or are there times that, as a woman, or a child, I was raised, your children are to be seen and not heard. What is that? So times have changed. We're a lot smarter. There's social media. We have so many tools to help us enrich each other's lives, but everybody's important. Men and women are important. It's just how you want to use them. Where are they in your life, and what are your boundaries, and how do we as women stand together so that we can rise even further? But everybody's important to our journey. That's just how I feel.
That's a really interesting take. That is not how I took this question, but I agree with everything that you're saying, in the sense of, I think that we all need both men and women in our lives to help on our journey and our evolution. And the divine masculine has also been a great helper along my journey. I have so many good things to say. I have an incredible dad. I have a great brother. I have had uncles that have supported me and loved me. I have even the guys we've talked about on this podcast, whether it worked out or not, immense gratitude for what I've learned. But to the question, I think it's more about, do you need to be saved by that true love's kiss kind of vibe? That's how I perceived it. And I think for me, I've definitely had that mindset. And then I had really what I thought was a sure thing, like right around when I graduated college. And that was like my true love's kiss, my great love, and everything about that was going to like set me up for the life of my dreams. And when that fell through, we call him baseball guy, it literally like shattered me. And I like went and had no direction. But the greatest thing I got out of that was that it's me. I can build my life. I don't need a man to do that. Now, that doesn't mean I don't need no man, because I would like a man and I need a man, and there's beauty in having that balance. But I guess to answer the question, I would say that yes, I've been there, and it's really empowering when you do realize, though, that you don't have to be rescued, that you yourself have everything that you need.
And I was going to say, too, to that same question, is my upbringing, my religious aspect of my upbringing. Even when I was a little girl, we sang songs about getting married and having these families at our Sunday school. And as a woman, it was kind of like, you are not really valuable unless you have this other person. And you don't go to the same level of heaven if you don't have this, like, I mean, it would be different if you're like working together with this person. It was like, no, you need this person. You cannot, like I said, growing up, all songs about being a wife and a mother. And that was kind of the purpose around that. So for me, that was kind of my upbringing. And I think that led me into some relationships that I wasn't really into, but it was someone that showed up and could fill that role that I was supposed to find. And in my personal religion of my upbringing until I was 13, it was supposed to be someone when you're 18. So right away. So anyway, yes, that has played out in my life. Definitely.
Even the way we say it at weddings, like, who gives this woman away? It's kind of an interesting thing to think about. I still do like it a little bit of like, yeah, like I am protected and loved by my family, and now I have this additional person. But I do think it's very deeply steeped in our culture, like that we have been needed to be handed off as if we couldn't do it ourselves. We needed that fresh prince.
If a woman's going to be asked that question, then a man needs to be asked that same question. Who gives this man away? It cannot just be one-sided. I've got my little finger out waving.
I loved my daughter's wedding. She was 20, how old was she? 22, 23, 4. She walked herself down the aisle. Beautiful, strong. She had been to college, lived on her own, lived a year in Japan. She gave herself away because she was a strong, independent woman. So for me,
that's badass.
That was badass. That is probably one of my most proud moments of my daughter. So I learned from her. Like, now maybe she pushed me into being that stronger, independent woman. And, I don't know, just some really good stories. And do we need a man? No. Have we all been kissed by one? Yes. Does it help? Sometimes, sometimes not so much.
I have to say, we have to look at the language, though. Like this idea of, we have to give ourselves away. Holy cow. I don't want to give myself away to a man. Not anymore. I mean, that was the programming of my childhood. And I wasn't raised with a religious situation like you were, Noelle. But sure, I went and saw Snow White. That was like, I'm sure kids now don't even know what Snow White is probably, but the prince that saves her with the kiss. And of course, then women were demonized as well, the evil witch, the evil stepmother, whatever it was. But yes, I mean, I have been in this position as well. And somewhat like Teresa, I'm grateful for the man in my life that helped me grow beyond this.
Mhm.
I don't need a man anymore to save me because I am perfectly
Yeah.
capable of saving myself.
I can't wait to see what the terminology moving forward every year, how it evolves with a wedding or a union or a partnership to show up, really strong, that the man wants and admires and respects an equally strong woman, that they move together in equal partnership. That would be a
Yes.
beautiful thing. Mm-hmm.
When are men and women going to be joined in sacred partnership
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
instead of joined in
And
a
giving away.
contract? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think this is
You young little maidens, you write that book. Rewrite that book.
I find this an interesting conversation, and I'm really eager to hear what Jenna has to say, because I do think this brings up the balance of the masculine and the feminine. And there is something really beautiful. The masculine are the banks of the river, and the feminine is that creative, like sensual, free-flowing force that can flow better within the banks. Their flow is supported with those banks of that river. And so I don't want this conversation to be misinterpreted, or I want to make it clear that when we're saying you don't need to be saved by the kiss, I think that's a first realization that people have to understand. But I also, let me speak for myself, I'm not saying that you then have to be equal in the terms of the exact same. There are truly things biologically that are different that I can do as a woman and different than a man can do. Maddie, my neighbor and college roommate and very good friend, and I were joking the other day. We go to the gym every morning at 5:30. And we're like doing the dang thing, you guys. We are not just lifting tiny little weights. We're out here. I'm like lifting like 30 pounds. I'm doing lunges with like 30 pounds, okay? And this guy who lives on the other side of me, he is this skinny dude, not a lot of muscles, but he's also in the gym at 5:30. He comes, he does some quick and easy things, doesn't lift too heavy. Well, Maddie and I are trying to lift my bed. I have a king size bed, and I was trying to get this rug out of it. When I tell you, it was such a struggle. Could not. I was like, for the love of all that's holy, could barely lift it like a few inches off of the ground. Like, I'm talking sweat. I'm talking. So we call him over. We're like, hey, like, we need 2 people. Would you mind helping us? The man comes over and he lifts that bed 6 feet off the ground. Listen, his muscles don't look much bigger than mine. But my point is like, he has a different muscular composition, and thus he is able to do different things and create different results. So I shall get off of this, but I do want to honor that there is this beautiful play of the masculine and feminine together. It's just not what it has been, which is the woman is weak and wounded, and the man is this like divine rescuer that pulls her from the depths of her despair as a maiden. So that's all I have to say about that.
No, I think that that's a really good point. This question kind of brings up a lot. I could take it in a lot of different angles, but I kind of thought of the idea about how when I was younger, I don't know that I ever felt like I needed a man, but that's always something I've wanted and been interested in. But I think rebounding from the times that I got really hurt in a romantic relationship, I think I embodied in that point very quickly after, I think I embodied some of this angry energy of like, I don't need anyone. I'm this like badass who doesn't need anyone. And that's the point, the way I was reading it in the book a little bit, when you've taken it too far and you're actually deeply hurt and you really do want to be with somebody, but you're embodying this energy of like, I'm fine with me, myself, and I don't need anyone. And like, the reality is we're social beings. We do need, in a different connotation of the word need, community around us, whether that's in a romantic sense or not. For me, having it in a romantic sense is always something I've wanted, but not necessarily something that I thought, like I'm going to be half a person, or I'm not going to be a whole person if I don't have this. But I do think when it all comes together, when you are craving that, is when you truly are at a place of peace of like, I would like that, but my life is going to work out in the way that it's supposed to be. And I think that's when all of the right relationships have come into my life, where you're truly at peace of like, I feel good doing me, and I'm going to keep doing me, whatever that means, doing my hobbies, seeing my friends. And I think that is when you can attract that man into your life if that's what you're seeking. The other part of this, I think also to your point, Ashlyn, is I have seen being in a relationship that I'm really happy in, that because I'm a soft person at my core. I just am. I'm super sensitive. I am a softie. I'm like a pile of mush on the inside. And I think sometimes I can put on this like distance between those two things as a self-protection mechanism. And I have really found, as I've like eased into this group of being with the person I've been with for almost 4 years now, is some allowance for those things, like allowing somebody to take care of you, not like acquiescing to that of like, oh, I need to be taken care of, like poor little me, like I need a man, but like not resisting it if that's something that you feel like your heart is wanting and your partner is wanting to give that to you. I think a perfect example of that is like, yes, you can hold my suitcases. Thank you. Like, I don't need to be like, I got it. No, I got it. It's like, no, thank you. I appreciate you doing that. Or like, yes, I would love if you could hang my pictures on the wall. I don't want to do it. Like some of these, like, not to stereotype, but like some of these more manly things. I mean, if I'm being honest, I haven't built a dang piece of furniture or hung one thing up on the wall in this house. It's all been Martin. So there is something to letting it happen, even though I'm fully capable of doing those things. We can counterbalance those in some ways and take them on. Like, I don't do all the cooking just because I'm a woman. For a long time, Martin did more of the cooking than I did, but we can like balance those things in ways that feel right. And some of the things that maybe are more feminine, I can take on. Like, I'm going to write more cute handwritten love notes to him than he's going to write to me because that comes more naturally to them. And I think there is a bit of letting that flow and let it happen in that energy, like you said, Ashlyn, while still balancing yourself as a complete person.
I literally just love what you said so much. And I think you just pointed out is we also have a wounded maternal side of us in that we have overcorrected to be like, we have a wounding where now we've shut down our feminine to be so much in our masculine to be like, look at me, I can do whatever a man does and I don't need no man and I don't need your help and da da da. And it's like, well, that's not in your feminine either. So it's the yin and the yang. Where do we find our healthy, balanced feminine that says, okay, I'm not a weak, little maiden over here, but I'm also not a tiger biting off your head on this side. Like
Right.
There is a balance that we have to find. And I love that you just called that out because that is so true. Allowing that masculine to show up as well.
And one last quick thing that I will say is I think it's this ongoing check-in, because I think we will find, like, here's the perfect example. I was with my mom one time and her car battery didn't start. My first instinct was to call my dad or to call my boyfriend. That was literally my first instinct. And it was one of those things like, okay, no, you can do this. You can figure out how to like jump a car. You can go get somebody inside. And we actually happened to have one of those self-charging battery things. It was like the stupidest thing ever, but I was like kind of freaking out. Like, I don't know how to use this. And then I was like, okay, Jenna, calm down. There's instructions on it. Like, you don't need to call your dad. You can figure this out. And that was an empowering moment, but it goes back to, that's just a little example, like a little microcosm in the bigger thing of that. Like, you do have to constantly check in because there are some ways that you are then naturally going to like flow one way or the other, where you need to check in with yourself, where it's like, okay, no, this is a scenario where I am fully capable and should be fully capable of figuring this out. And I need to start with me first before I ask for somebody else's help.
Is there that wounding in that maiden that's saying, oh my gosh, rescue me, I can't do this? Or is that maiden saying, I've got this, but I choose to allow someone else to take care of this. Like, I choose to step back. I actually think that's more of a mother decision to be able to know when to hold them and when to fold them.
There's a difference, I think. Yes, I think the generation of Noelle and Teresa and I much more come from the generation of, we have been kind of wounded in this idea that we did have to be more masculine to be able to fit in to our work and to our jobs. I mean, I was in corporate America early on, and I definitely had to be, or I felt like I had to be more masculine to play that role. And there's such validity in this idea of understanding the strengths of the masculine, understanding the strengths of the feminine, and then working together to create something that really feels good and joyous to both of you, where you're seen and you're heard and you're able to express truly who you are. On the other side of this, what I want to say is that the wounding is we think that if we find this person, that it solves all of our problems. And that really isn't the case. Usually, when we go into a relationship with this idea that this person solves all of our problems, whatever that list may be, because it's very personal to all of us, it's then that our wounding really shows up. And we know that we've made the decision not from a place of empowerment, but from a place of personal insecurity and weakness, from the place of the maid.
That was a very good point. Round of applause.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, ladies. Give yourself all a round
Cool.
of applause. Should we move on to the next question? The author's intent was to take you on a journey to inspire and to help you step into mature womanhood, where a woman stands confidently in her power, just as she is, and with all of her unique ideas and passions.
I actually think this book came at a really good time for me because I actually think this is where I'm at in my life. College, moving away, teaching English in Thailand, studying abroad, those were all moments in which they called upon my mother over my maiden, and I feel very grateful for those moments. But I have felt this up-leveling. As you guys know, my word for the year is empire. And so thus, it is my desire to create everything in my life to be that empire, thriving, gold, sparkling, vibrant energy. And during this, I have gone through my own little level of initiation, which goes back to the word she used so commonly, which was embody. And I absolutely love that word. And so I just feel like this is where I'm at, where I'm like, I'm being called. I think that's what your 20s are a little bit. Like, I think your 20s are this weird transition from maiden to mother. And maybe people don't get there in their 20s. Maybe they do it in their 30s. And I know there are things probably throughout your life that are calling you from maiden to mother, even as you get into the crone age. Like, I still think there's probably stuff there. But I just think this is the journey of your 20s is really what I wanted to say about that. And then I did some of the meditations, and I did all of the meditations, and I really liked the one where she had you go and see your inner child. And my inner child was looking good. She was sparkly and clean, and she was well loved, but I could feel something that has been that challenge for so much of my life, which is like just like wanting that love. Like, and so when you could see that inner girl, it's just that initial realization to be like, okay, but you now, it is your job to give that to you. Where for so long you think, oh, it's my mom's job, it's my dad's job, it's my family's job. That's how I flip on love, and my friends, and blah, 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 blah. And I have self-love. I'm not trying to say that I am empty of that or void of that. But like, where truly your wholeness has to come from you. And it's not in the next guy either. And I've not really ever been a girl that looked for wholeness in a guy, but that was my maiden to mother realization of like, I am on the right path. I am already doing this, and I agree with what she's saying. And I could think of, there was a woman specifically that I could think of while I was reading this book, that she holds the belief that there is not enough love. And she creates this self-fulfilling prophecy by basically isolating herself from everyone, by pushing them away, by trying to control the love. No, you can only give me that love. You can't give it to that person. And that person, well, then they don't want to give you their love anymore because they're like, you're crazy. And so I think that on her journey, it's her inner child. It's so clear to me in reading this book. Like, she just needs that inner child picked up and rocked and loved and nurtured. So that's it.
For me, Ashlyn, the meditation, the same one. I did all of them, but that one was the one I just resonated, I guess, the most with, was that inner child, because
Same.
I've always had more mother qualities. I was the oldest child, and I've just, that's just more my role always. And any time ever, we've all had readings and whatnot, it always says, play more, just play, Teresa. Like, you don't have to work so, just play. So that for me was probably the one that resonated the most. I saw that child, the child's there. I have fun, don't get me wrong, but fun is different than playing to my definition. And for me to play, I have to really hone down the crone and the mother for those moments to let the maiden come out and play. So that would be my ongoing balance and challenge, is let that just play, little maiden play.
Love it.
So it's funny because for me, I actually started having this realization maybe just within the last month and a half before I even started reading this book, but just this profound realization about the building blocks of life. And what I mean by that is a lot of the past podcasts, we've asked this question of what would you tell your younger self? And I had this epiphany recently that just everything makes sense because it builds off of each other and you learn these lessons exactly when you're supposed to learn them. So a couple of examples, like yesterday, I went to the gym by myself and I was full on like lifting weights in the row where all the men were. Like I was like the only girl in the row. If you had asked me to do that a year ago, could never. Wouldn't even walk into a gym by myself because I'd be too intimidated, let alone to like go into a weight class. Same thing with like a workout class. Ashlyn, I distinctly remember you and Alicia would go to yoga when we were in college. And I remember at the time feeling kind of ashamed where I was like, wow, I don't feel like I could do that by myself. I would feel so intimidated. And now I can do that like it's nothing, you know? And even like public speaking, I was a really shy child. I have spoken to groups of 200 plus people giving business presentations like it's nothing. But if you had asked me that when I was in high school, I would have been like, no, not a chance. And there wasn't a way that all of those things would have come together and just happened because I wasn't ready for them. And there's going to be a next thing in a year from now, in 2 years from now, 5, 10, 20, where I'm saying the same exact thing. That is, I can't believe I'm doing this. I didn't think I was capable of it. And I really have taken in a lot of peace with that because I think I get really quick to judge myself of like, why can't I just do that? Like, figure it out, put yourself out there, whatever it may be. And I think I've come to this place of like, it will unfold when it's ready, when it's time for you. And I think this is part of that maiden to mother thing is I too have a lot of these motherly qualities that you guys are talking about. I've wanted to be a mom to children since I was like 4. Like I grew up with a ton of cousins. Like I have that kind of caretaker intuition, but there are other ways, like I was just, exemplifying, that are still those building blocks that I need to grow. And that's the journey of life, right? But I also think that it's so interesting to kind of give yourself that space of not being so hard on ourselves to like, I don't want to say like to evolve quicker than we have to. Like, of course, we always want to grow and like find the next thing to grow. But I think there's this absolute like natural evolution of like when it's ready and your time to take that step and figure that out, it will become clear and you'll chip away at that next part of you that's a maiden yearning to become a mother.
There were a couple different thoughts I had about that question. And Jenna, thank you. I think that you brought up like a really valid point in that wanting to be a mother. I mean, obviously, I went into the education field because I'm nurturing, and that's what always called me. And I always wanted that as well. That kind of went back to my other question when we were talking about that. So I want to make sure I brought that up to you, that I'm glad you resurfaced that. I feel like the maiden to the wounded maiden to the mother to the crone isn't necessarily tied to becoming an actual physical mother. I think it's more that mother to ourselves, or actually the whole thing to me, I kept looking at it through this kind of spiritual lens of spiritual growth. Like this, I'm totally in my ego when I'm a maiden, and And there are times that I get wounded because I'm in that ego. And then I start to realize, wait, I'm creating this. I'm the creator of my life and my experience. That's when I'm in my mother. And then when I get to that crone is when I can impart the wisdom that I learned, that kind of by looking at both aspects of my life, then I can share that wisdom with others. So it's not really tied to an age. It's more tied to like more like or sections of our life, maybe our spiritual life and our job life and our familial life and our relationship, our romantic relationships, to all of these different aspects of our life. And that's why we can we can kind of flow back and forth between all of those different archetypes. We can flow back and forth between those different archetypes. And it's not like we ever get there, because life isn't about getting there. It's about the experiences along the way. Just like you said, Jenna, it shows up when we need it. When we need to learn that lesson, the teacher appears. And I don't mean a person as a teacher, an experience as a teacher when we're ready for that. Anyway, we go back and forth. And I thought on page 54 through 56 was the list of the maiden reactions and the mother responses. And as I read through there, I cannot tell you how many times I had to, suck it in, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I just did that yesterday. Here I am thinking I'm a mother. And then I was like, and so I can see like different aspects of my life and how those show up. So it's like, it's a journey. And there's not an end point where like one day I'm a crone and I have a crown on my head and I can only spit wisdom at everyone else. No, it's like it's a beautiful dance going between all of the different archetypes. So
that was my favorite part of the book, what you just said.
Literally what I was just going to say. That was the best page of the book. I agree. I was on the page so I could read the first couple just to give the listeners an idea of the one perspective versus the other, if that's helpful.
I love it. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so it's a table and maiden reactions are on the left and mother responses are on the right. So an example is maiden reaction, I am sick of feeling. Mother response, I am ready to feel or I want to feel. Maiden reaction, insecure. Mother, inner security. Maiden, not present, always busy. Mother, present, living for the moment. Maiden, victimization and self-pity. Mother, responsible for my life. So this goes on for a few pages, but that truly, I'm so glad you brought that up, Noel, because that was really profound to me. And it's this idea of also taking ownership over the things, not I'm sick of life happening to me. And it takes back that power of redirecting and recreating the narrative.
Maybe another way to put what we learned in this book is just getting in your power.
Yeah, every human being, when I looked at these, I wrote, boys to men have very similar, you could put boy and then men on one side, just like you could mother and maiden. And really, it's just the journey all of us human beings have to heal our inner wounding and become secure, to become in our personal power, and to be able to do that with a way that is compassionate to the rest of the world.
We thought this was going to be a short podcast, but man, we have a lot to say. I think one of the things that I've thought about too is I don't think the goal, like Noelle just said, is that you're always going to be mother, you're going to get to this crone and it's this final destination. I do think some of it is also shortening the gap between the time it takes you to go from a maiden to a mother in a particular triggering situation. Or you could reference it from the ego to your whole true spiritual self. And using those tools to be able to transition back to your true self of love more quickly with each thing that life throws at you.
Amen. I hope if someone got something out of that book, it was this. Like there's power in the pause, and you can shorten that maiden response.
Well, I think that takes us, this has been somewhat of a long podcast. We've had a lot to say about this, but we are women, and this book was about women, and we've had a lot of really incredible things to discuss. So our last question is, what is your greatest takeaway from this book? And I'm going to challenge you. Can you come up with your greatest takeaway in just one sentence? I'll start. The world needs healthy women.
Our power is within us.
I am capable.
Live authentically.
The only thing harder than letting go is holding on. Holding on is tearing you apart. Letting go will carry you.
Way to rock it, ladies. You killed it. Good
And
job.
So it is, ladies.
All right. So on a scale of 1 to 5, what did you think? 1 being the worst, 5 being the best.
I'm going to give it a 3. If we could look beneath the anger, I think she had a lot of wonderful things to say. If we could look beyond the anger and the victimhood, we could see some beautiful nuggets of wisdom.
I was going to also give it a 3. I think there are some really good nuggets. I think this has got a lot of packed wisdom, but maybe it wasn't always conveyed, explained, or energetically shared in the way that we would have preferred.
Well, I'm going to give it a 3, which I thought some of you would give it a little bit higher than that. I think 3 was going to be on the low side. There are always nuggets in every book, whether it's one little sentence or not. There were several, and I did like some of the meditations. I thought they were very self-reflective, and if you got into it, would take you where you needed to go. So I'm giving it a 3 based on that.
Paige, you want to go?
No, Jenna, you go.
I can never be easy with these ratings, so I'm going 2.5. Sorry, I can't pick a round number, but I feel like I've said plenty, so the rest of the podcast will speak for my rating. But I do have to say, ironically, this happened to be one of my favorite discussions we've done. So it never fails us. You don't even need a good book; you just need a good podcast.
I'm going to give it a 3 as well. Because I do think she had some really important points in there that women really do need to pay attention to. This book that as we do our year in review, we're like, oh my gosh, that really stuck with me.
I totally agree.
I want to say really quickly before we move on, Paige alluded to this as well, but I want to remind everyone that the patriarchy that she talks about also really wounded men and boys as well. And I see it all the time at school, and I'm sure we see it in the grown men in our lives as well. So I felt like that needed to be said.
Thank you for saying that, Noelle.
Thank you.
I would say mic drop Noelle on that one.
I think that's where the Love Ignites piece perspective comes back in, and everything we just said about this book with feeling the anger and all of that. It's like, but wait, they're wounded too. They also deserve our compassion and our love and our grace, and they need to heal as well. So.
All right. Well, I'm going to take us out of this podcast with a couple of quotes from the book, and then we'll talk about what our book is for next month. So on page 153, she writes, "This abuse happens when you take the great mother, the source of life itself, out of a culture. All we see is death. When love is removed from the culture, all we see is war. If soul is taken out of culture, all we know is ego." And then the last quote, "When the women of the world come into full bloom, the world goes from a wasteland to a garden again."
Aw,
So,
that's a good one.
Yeah. So next month is called A Year to Live by Stephen Levine. It is a very short little read for our July book club. And interestingly enough, I didn't know this. This was already picked. This book was in the recommended reading in the back of Maiden to Mother.
Oh,
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
we'll find out.
We sure will.
A Year to Live will also have a good conversation about that, and I think it'll give us some food for thought.
Some wonderful book club, you guys.
Yes.
discussion.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, with that said, ladies, let's bloom.
Right.
Let's
Bring our
bloom,
healed
yes.
selves to the world to heal the
Right.
world.
Right. Yay.
The seeds are planted, and with that said, as always, I am sending you love from my heart to yours, as is everybody on this book club podcast. We'll see you next month.
Yay.
Get your freak on.